This is Polyamory Weekly, number 28 for October 4th, 2005. And coming up on this week's show, Kinky Kollege, the Polyamory Weekly drinking game, unindicted co-conspirators, polyamory in the media, a Dutch threesome, cool podcast, and a whole conference on the Big J. All coming up on this week's show. Hello and welcome to Polyamory Weekly, number 28 for October 4th, 2005. For our under 18 listeners, this is an adult-oriented podcast about lascivious things like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit www.scarletteen.com. For everyone else, this is Polyamory Weekly, Tales from the Front of Responsible Non-Monogamy from a Pansexual, Kink-Friendly Point of View. I am your host, Minx, and I want to thank everyone for your patience with me. I was really burnt out last week and had to be polyamorous instead of talking about being polyamorous. So first up, before I even start talking about Kinky Kollege, we have to play the Polyamory Weekly drinking game, unless you're under 21 and listening to this, in which case, don't drink. Alien Sunset wrote in and asked about a topic that we'll discuss in more detail on another show, but concluded with the email with, and for now, I would like to leave you with this thought. While listening to your podcast in the car tonight, Oak Song and I devised the Poly Weekly drinking game. Every time Mink says communication or discussion, you take a drink. Most people wouldn't be able to make it past the first 15 minutes. Keep on casting Alien Sunset. Well, this made me roll on the floor laughing. Thank you so much for writing in. I actually think what we should do is play sort of like we used to play Beer Trek. We'd play Star Trek and everybody in the room would pick a character. And whenever your character did or said his or her catchphrase, then you would drink. For example, if you had selected Captain Jean-Luc Picard, you took a drink every time he stood up and tugged on his uniform, or every time he said, engage. Or, for example, if you were Counselor Troy, then you had to drink every time she thought or felt something but wasn't sure exactly what it was. So I think that different people, like maybe your word can be communication, or maybe your phrase can be do the work. Or Minx doesn't give advice, but... So just pick your phrase and then you drink with that. But at any rate, I think you're completely right that everyone would be drunk really quickly. So thanks for the good laugh. On to discussing Kinky Kollege. I won't discuss the entire conference in detail because I didn't actually get to go to very much of it. But I'm very happy that I got to attend Lolita Wolf's class on polyamory. And she talked about many things, but there are two big things that I, in particular, took notes on and that really struck a chord with me. First of all, she said, if you have an emotion, make an agreement. And I thought this was absolutely wonderful. Like if you discover that you are jealous or if you're insecure or if you're really upset about something, of course, talk about it, have a discussion, make sure you're participating in communication. That's 3 drinks right there. But, talk it through, but also make an agreement about it. Come up with some type of rule or agreement for you and your partner or partners that's going to make it a little easier for you. Somebody in the audience, for example, raised a hand and said, because she did get, very jealous, even though she knew she didn't have a reason to, when she was feeling that, tinge of jealousy, she would basically text message her partner saying, I'm longing for you. And longing was the code word for them. Now, of course, it didn't mean the partner had to jump up right then and do something about it, but it was a system that worked for them. And another thing that really struck me about Lolita Wolf's seminar is that she gave lots of different examples of lots of different ways of lots of different agreements that many different poly configurations used, and that was really helpful to me. It's why I like getting the listener mail so much too, because I like hearing about different kinds of relationship and sort of what works for you, that sort of thing. The other thing that really worked for me and that really struck a chord with me, I'm very into Zen Buddhism and also the belief that in your life, the only thing you have control over is your own beliefs, your own words, and your own actions. You absolutely cannot control what other people believe, what other people say, and what other people do, even people that you love and that love you very, very much. You can't do it. It's not your job. It will only frustrate you if you try to do it. And to some extent, it gets confusing because it sounds like we're saying, oh, no, don't communicate. Just go with the flow. I kind of believe in sort of a mix of the two. But one thing that she really said that really struck a chord with me was, let other people do what they're going to do. Don't even worry about that. Just live honorably. If for some reason you can't make an agreement, or you make an agreement and it doesn't seem to work, you have the choice to live honorably. Just live how you think is honorable. Other people are going to do what they want, and they will have the results, benefits, drawbacks, whatever, to the lifestyle, the words, the actions that they choose. What you do is choose to live honorably. And that really resonated with me. So, we do have a lot of listener mail. I'll try to go through it. It's because I took the week off, and I do apologize for that. But we'll kind of zip through it really quickly. And let's just assume that everybody gave strokes to the minx. The minx is purring, and the minx is really, really happy. Dollfan actually wrote in about a poly-instructional film and said, I haven't made it through all of your podcasts yet, but I do enjoy them immensely. As a sex educator, I ordered the film When Two Won't Do for my class. And he gave me the link, which is www.picturethis.ca/when_2TWO.html. He said, I had seen the producers, Maureen and David, on Montel Williams years ago and thought they did an okay job of talking about polyamory. However, I was kind of disappointed in the film they put together. I was wondering if you'd seen it and what you and others in the poly community think of it. I'll say I don't think I'll be using it in my human sexuality class. Keep up the good work. Stay kinky. Dollfan. Well, Dollfan, I did take a look at the link. I read the little the blurb in the description. I haven't seen it. I probably won't, especially since you don't seem to like it very much. So if anyone else out there has seen the film, can give us a review of it, or if there's another poly-friendly film that you would recommend for a sex education or sexual behavior class, write in. Cunningminx, CUNNINGMINX @gmail.com. Next email, Mark Singer wrote in about labels. He said, pretty much on the same page as you, as being dissatisfied with all the various terms for various partners. Of late, I've been referring to the two women I live with as the wife and the wife regent. I'm not sure if that's our term or we picked it up somewhere else. On the other hand, I've no idea what to call the other woman I'm dating. She's happy with secondary. I hate the term and only use it on occasion and only for the sake of expediency. I'd chance a guess that you've been collecting a few of these over time. Might make a good segment resource for the main site. Oh, nearly forgot. The relationship is best described as a V, so the two women in question are not physically involved, but extremely close nonetheless. So they get the question, okay, so you're both involved with him. What are you to each other? Their favorite answer? Unindicted co-conspirators. Now, I wrote back, I was pretty uncreative with my terms. I suggested the term lover, the term boyfriend, but something, I don't like the term secondary, of course, because it implies a hierarchy. It's like you wouldn't say this is my primary child and this is my secondary child. It would imply that one is more important than the other, and I've never liked that term. But the term lover, it actually has that sexual context to it, so if you don't want to apply anything sexual, you're really kind of stuck with making up creative names. So if you have a creative label, go ahead and write me, and we'll read it on the air, and maybe other people will be comfortable with it too. All right, moving on. Next mail. Brenu Star wrote in with one show idea would be the intersection of polyamory and spirituality. I know that for me, the guilt of being poly was difficult to reconcile with my being poly and Christian, practicing Catholic. I did it, but only by separating my ethics from my faith. It's actually a little bit of concern to me that you have to separate your ethics from your faith. Especially with Christianity, Because again, I mean, if you look into the Bible, there's polygamy, there's men loving 2, 3, 4 women all over the place, and they're not really presented as unethical. And I grew up a Bible thumping Christian in the South, in the Bible Belt of Texas, and I haven't cracked a Bible. I memorized so many Bible verses in my youth; it's not even funny. But my recollection's a little hazy since it's been a good 20 years since I think I've cracked the Bible open at all. But even in the New Testament, I understand like the Catholic Church places a lot of limitations on it, but if you're strictly going by the Bible, I think you could make a really good argument for polyamory, especially if you go to some of the more esoteric passages in the New Testament. Thinking of like the beginning of John, which is, the Word is love and love is the universe. And I mean, it's very, very, especially like some of the Gospel of John and even some of Paul's letters can be very inspirational to pagans because it's very much about spirit and word and love and not so specifically about do this moral thing or do that moral thing. But hey, if you want to write in and correct me, feel free. Again, cunningminx@gmail.com. And moving on, we had a lot of topics covered in the mail this week. Coming out story from Kel. You asked about coming out stories. Here's mine. I've started the whole conversation with my mother and stopped every time, because she gets this look on her face like I kicked her in the stomach. Ditto for my sister. So I said, screw that. Let them think what they will. I've always been independent from my family anyhow. But the best story is with my best friend. One night, my best friend and I went on a platonic date and spent the night just talking. During the course of the night, I let it slip out that I'm bi, and the response was utterly lovely after the initial but completely understandable shock. I think that's why I feel complete/content around him and the rest of my friends. Sadly, I don't think that's something I'll ever feel around my family. Well, unfortunately, no. I really do wish I could give advice, and maybe people who have been poly for, 10 or 20 years can give advice on how to come out to family. As a matter of fact, if I collect enough information and have the time to organize it into a good format, we will do a show, maybe even a white paper. We'll actually do an article or something on suggestions and talking points on how to come out to friends and family. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier that I learned at the polyamory seminar by Lolita at Kinky Kollege, that the most important thing is to live honorably. Be true to yourself, do what you think is best, and you can't control if other people are going to respond favorably to you or not. What you can do, as I've often suggested, is make sure you don't go in with a chip on your shoulder. Make sure you go in a spirit of love and in a spirit of openness, expecting that you will be loving and open towards them so that they will hopefully give that back to you. But apart from that, live honorably, live according to your principles, and if they, look like you kicked her in the stomach, be as sympathetic and as understanding as you can. Try not to be defensive. Try to be there to answer their questions, and, if they're still defensive, well, you have no control over that. Let them be defensive, let them be upset, let them ask their questions. Hopefully they'll get over it. If they don't, that's their choice to live their lives that way, and you can't really do anything about that. Well, you know what? That sounds dangerously like advice, so we better move on. Actually, if anybody is, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but if anybody is curious about incorporating more Zen into your life and finding a bit more peace, I've been reviewing these books lately and doing a bit more meditation because my own poly relationships have been tumultuous, to say the least, lately. I highly recommend Charlotte Joko Beck's book on Nothing Special Everyday Zen and Everyday Zen Love and Work is, I think, what the other one is called. If you just do an Amazon.com search for Charlotte Joko, Joko, Beck, Beck, you'll find the books. They were actually published quite a while ago. I couldn't find them in bookstores. I had to order them off the internet because they're I think they're maybe 17 years old. But they're great if you want to get a little bit more Zen perspective on going with the flow, on accepting other people and the universe for what it is, and on just sort of, living honorably and accepting everything as it comes. Okay, more listener mail. Moving on. B2 wrote in and said, my wife and I have really been enjoying Rope Weekly and Polyamory Weekly. Rope Weekly, by the way, of course, available at www.graydancer.com. That's graydancer.com/rope weekly. And he says, I feel I learned a few great things from every Poly Weekly. You guys are so open-minded, yet very clear about some great ways to improve relationships. You get me thinking in such a productive way. It seems to me that the polyamory skills that you describe, if I can be better at them, I can supercharge our monogamous relationship. I'm open-minded, but not sure I could handle the additional workload and scheduling of poly. And you know what? I'll just insert here B2. That is a really great thing to recognize. I don't think it can be said enough that polyamory is just like monogamy, but, with 2, 3, or 4 times the work. Everybody drink. Mink said work. Woohoo! But it's a great concept and fun to think and talk about and be open-minded about. Thanks so much for all of it. He says, I found Radical Ecstasy, which is, again, Janet Hardy and Dossie Easton's new book, available at your local bookstore or through the Greenery Press at www.greenerypress.com at the local Borders last week, just after hearing you talk about it. It's a very interesting book. It's so much less how to and what to do and more about why to do it and why and how it can feel and be rewarding. I especially like the role play stuff. Why, how, what it's usually about, why it's fulfilling from about page 150 onward. And B2, I'll interject here and say I'm savoring Radical Ecstasy as well because I agree. They have written many how-to books. And actually Janet Hardy said in her seminar at Ohio Leatherfest that she stopped writing how-to books because she wanted her polyamory and her BDSM practice to be about heart, not about technique or about the head or anything like that. While those things are still important, she really wanted to focus on the heart, the spirit, the energy, the why, the connection of it. And that really definitely comes through in her seminars and in Radical Ecstasy. So I'm so glad that you picked it up and read it. Yay! He continues, like other listeners write in, I also really need help on how to argue better. And he actually attached the Monty Python clip of the argument clinic, which I will probably pigeonhole away and use in a later podcast. I apologize. I've been communicating my ass off and I really don't feel like talking about arguing right now. But we will definitely talk about it more in future podcasts. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of the email. He says bye for now. And I'm so glad. I always feel like I come on the air and I'm just babbling. I love to draw from what listeners say. This is a comment-driven show. This is a community resource. This is for everyone out there in the polyamory, swinging, monogamous, interested, curious community to write in and say what you think, to give feedback. We also do talk a lot about things that come up in the blogs, in the forums, and in the press, as opposed to just minks babbling all the time. So thanks very much for that contribution.
Hi, this is Jason in Virginia. You're listening to Polyamory Weekly with the ever-delightful Kenning Minks. Polyamory Weekly, where it's all about the lovin'.
And now we're getting on a little bit more to the topics and the meat of the show. We're going to be, it's so funny, I said something about, we should talk about poly in the media, and then all of a sudden, all this media stuff came in. I'm going to start with a listener mail, a couple of articles that came up over the last few weeks in the New York Times, in Foreign Policy, that couple in the Netherlands. And then for me personally, right after I asked about, hey, we should be talking more about polyamory in the media, what should our role be? And I swear the very next day, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune contacted me to interview me for an article on monogamy. Is it going out of style? It's actually not for the more respectable Chicago Tribune. It's for the much less respectable and fluffed up marshmallow fluff paper, the Red Eye, which is intended for commuters to read on the train and then throw away. But still, it's a lot more mainstream than we are right now, so I was nervous as heck. Anyway, for those who have been following my blog and the Poly Weekly blog, I have already talked to the reporter. I did have the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom talking points in front of me at the time. I don't think I did a very good job of sticking to the talking points, so I'm actually meeting with an NCSF person over the phone later this week to do a little bit more media training because I suspect this is going to be happening a bit more often. And there are times when Minx's babblings are just not quite as cute as they are on the podcast. And then also there's another podcast that is it's about the swinger community. It's a Spanish language podcast that is for the swinger community in Florida, and they have asked me for an interview that I'll be doing later in the week. And when that comes out, I will, of course, let you guys know the link. I'll be doing the interview in English. I guess it's going to be translated to Spanish. Hey, if anybody out there speaks Spanish, you can have the link. Whatever. So, yeah, there's this sort of media explosion in Minxland. Anyway, so on that topic, Dark Main wrote into me and said, in show number 27, you asked for what people thought was needed to be doing as far as poly in the media. At this point, I'm not certain that we need to be doing anything. I feel like polyamory is an odd place where we aren't faced with the hostility that gays and lesbians were as they began. And honestly, without that persecution, I don't know that we can get much traction asking for something like polymarriage or recognition as a sexual minority. Other than that, I can't think of what we might want from the media. I see no negative representations in the mass media. I do note, however, that I'm in a tolerant community in a tolerant city, and I will not say that my feeling a lack of persecution means people aren't being persecuted for being poly. Well, I think, Dark Man, that you have a point, that I don't think that the persecution is quite, by no means is it as severe as for, the gay or bisexual community, I feel. And if anybody else, of course, disagrees with this, please write in and let me know your experiences that we can share with the community. Cunningminx, CUNNINGMINX @gmail.com. But I am starting to think that, in particular with regards to legal unions and civil unions, I, as not being a legal wife, I won't say I feel persecuted, but I definitely don't have the same rights that other people have. As a matter of fact, I work in an office, and I was just making a joke the other day that I worked there off and on for 3 years to fill in the gaps, with, when my own business is slow, I go in there, they know me, I know them. The only thing anyone in that office has ever asked me is, are you married? And I said, no. And they never asked me anything else, and everyone there assumed that I was single, and I did not correct them on that point. But it's amazing. It was only this week when a new girl was hired in, and she was very chatty, and she asked me, do you have a boyfriend? And I looked at her and I said, in 3 years, you're the first person to ever ask me that question. Everyone else asked me if I was married. When I said no, they're like, oh, okay. That was it. Married, not married. And I said, actually, as a matter of fact, I have 2 boyfriends. I just don't go run around telling that to anybody because I'm afraid that it will come across as a little promiscuous or slutty or whatever. So I only answer direct questions honestly, but nobody's ever asked the question. That's Minx's little story of the week. Anyway, back to polyamory in the media. There's been a lot of it over the last few weeks. First of all, it was brought to my attention, the New York Times on September 4th. This was actually about a month ago. I don't know if you can still access the article or not. I will put a link to it in the show notes. You might have to access the archives and pay for it. But there was actually a short fiction story called 3 Men and a Woman written by Stephen Elliott. And it's exactly about that, 3 men and a woman. And it's about a meet, get to know you sort of little, relationship short story. But get this. Halfway through the story, these paragraphs appear. Angelina and I are exhausted from dancing. Our shirts are soaked. One time she said to me, I haven't placed any limits on you. You place limits on yourself. And to help, I've been reading a book about polyamory. The book recommends that you own your decisions. No one can make you do anything. The important thing is not to get in a cycle of blame, the book says, but rather to inform your partner of your feelings. Most relationships are doomed anyway. It's their nature. I squeeze Angelina's arms as she turns, throwing her legs over mine. When I first met her, I was shocked by her raw physical beauty. I didn't think the fact that she was in an open marriage would affect me one way or the other. I wasn't thinking long term. I had no idea of Angelina's capacity for affection. Some think that love is a finite resource, like food, that love given to one person is love taken from someone else. Others believe that the more you love, the more love you're capable of. It's what enables families to have more than one child. And the story goes on with how they dance and meet and whatnot. But, okay, are you just not astounded by these 2 paragraphs being inserted into a meet, get to know you sort of mini romance story in the New York Times? This is serious polyamory in the media. I'm very excited about this. As a matter of fact, as I have a chance to arrange more interviews, and by the way, we do have more interviews coming up, I very much want to contact Stephen Elliott and see if this was unusual. It sounds so well informed, doesn't it? I'm wondering if this is within the normal range of what he's writing and if he's polyamorous. We'll see. Now, the next article that came to my attention was published on the Foreign Policy website, which is www.foreignpolicy.com/story/cms.php story_ID equals 3170. And yes, I will put the link in the show notes. The story is called Monogamy, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow by Jacques Attali. And the whole article is about how monogamy is out of style. And I'm going to quote parts of it because it's really amazing. He writes, monogamy, which is really no more than a useful social convention, will not survive. It has rarely been honored in practice. Soon it will vanish even as an ideal. I do not believe that society will return to polygamy. Instead, we will move toward a radically new conception of sentimental and love relationships. Nothing forbids a person from being in love with a few people at the same time. Society rejects this possibility today primarily for economic reasons, to maintain an orderly transmission of property, and because monogamy protects women against male excesses. But these rationales are dissolving in the face of powerful new trends. And he continues, I'm reading my favorite bits of it. I flip my page. And he continues with the end of his article. At long last, we will recognize that it is human to love different people at the same time. The demise of monogamy will not come without a struggle. All the churches will seek to forbid it, especially for women. For a while they will hold the line, but individual freedom once again will triumph. The revolution will begin in Europe. America will follow, and the rest of the world will eventually come around. The implications will be enormous. Relationships with children will be radically different, financial arrangements will be disrupted, and how and where we live will change. To be sure, it will take decades for the change to be complete, and yet, if we look around, it's already here. Beneath our hypocrisies, in movies, novels, and music, the shape of our future is visible. That again is by Jacques Attali in the Foreign Policy website. And I find it radical simply because of the tone that he took. He did not say, and I believe this is actually why the reporter contacted me. She mentioned this article, she didn't give the name, and I didn't realize it was this article she was talking about. He doesn't actually present it, as you can see, so much with a chip on his shoulder as just he actually goes so far as to make a prediction, not just say, hey, some of us are polyamorous, some of us are here, please tolerate us. But he goes one step further, very adamantly, in a very positive way, to say this is the trend, this is what is happening, it's going to happen whether we like it or not, there's going to be a fight, but this is where things are going. And I find this I find it very exciting. I would never have been so bold as to say this. I'm more in the camp of, hey, we're here, we've been here, we would just really very much like for you to give us a voice, and oh, by the way, civil rights, please, thank you very much. But we'll see. Any comments, questions, feedback on this article, please email me or post to the show blog. And then, following this, beneath our hypocrisies, in movies, novels, and music, the shape of our future is visible, comes up this most recent article published on September 27th on the Brussels Journal, available at www.brusselsjournal.com/node, NODE /301. The first trio married in the Netherlands. Hello! The Netherlands and Belgium were the first countries to give full marriage rights to homosexuals. In the United States, some politicians propose civil unions that give homosexual couples the full benefits and responsibilities of marriage. These civil unions differ from marriage only in name. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, polygamy has been legalized in all but name. Last Friday, the first civil union of 3 partners was registered. Victor de Bruijn, Bruijn, yeah, I know I'm mispronouncing it terribly. I'm no longer dating a Dutch guy. From Roosendaal married both Bianca and Mirjam in a ceremony before a notary who duly registered their civil union. He said, I love Bianca and Mirjam, so I'm marrying them both, Victor said. He had previously been married to Bianca. 2.5 years ago, they met Miriam through an internet chat box. 8 weeks later, Miriam deserted her husband and came to live with Victor and Bianca. After Miriam's divorce, the threesome decided to marry. And Victor, quote, "A marriage between 3 persons is not possible in the Netherlands, but a civil union is. We went to the notary in our marriage costume and exchanged rings. We consider this to be just an ordinary marriage." And I think it's really funny that this comes a scant month after this article in Foreign Policy that says the revolution will begin in Europe, America will follow, and the rest of the world will eventually come around. Well, it's begun in Europe, so I'm wondering if the rest of the world will indeed follow suit. Personally, I would very much like to have these civil rights. So yeah, poly is definitely in the media. Okay, a few parting notes on and you know what? There was, I'm going to save the Dan Savage column about gay rights and polyamory rights on the same topic. I'm going to save that for next week because I'm a little tired of talking right now. And there are a couple of things I really wanted to get to. A couple of new podcasts I definitely want to recommend to you guys. First of all, one of our famous listeners, Takanami, his name may sound familiar because he's frequently writing in, and he actually gave us an audio recording for the last show. This is really sad that I'm like inspiring all these people to podcast. Takanami said that, he started podcasting, which is called Coloring Outside the Lines, and is available at, it's about his art and body painting. It's about tarot and his explorations with that. His rants about art, and it's just a very fun podcast. I've listened to the first 2. Love his voice. And it's funny, I don't have the link in front of me right now, so I'll just put that on the show notes. Available at www.livejournal.com/users/polyamory weekly, /poly weekly, POLYWEEKLY. The other podcast I finally got around to listening to was Sex with Emily, and that's available at www.sexwithemily.com/podcast. And I listened to her most recent podcast, which Great Answer had recommended I listen to, and I'm so glad you did. I'd been putting off adding more podcasts to my feed because my time is just at a premium right now, but I'm so glad I did because she was doing an interview with a married monogamous guest, but they talked about polyamory and polyamorous issues very frequently. And I was so excited to hear a woman who'd been married for 15 years and monogamously talk very positively about sex and her relationship. And whoever it was, there was a listener that wrote in and said, the reason that one podcast about the fucking and the threesome and everything, the reason that's so popular is because it's very inspiring to hear women speak openly about their sexuality. And I have to say, I agree with that because hearing this woman speak very confidently and very openly about her own sexuality without having to giggle or resort to euphemisms, she was speaking very frankly and very positively about her sex life and getting to know her pussy and everything and all that with her husband. It's just hot. I've decided, oh my God, all the cool people are in San Francisco. I have to move to San Francisco. And I love that she even said, communication is great, open communication, blah, 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 but sometimes you just need to have sex. Sometimes the talking's done, or sometimes it's just easier to have sex, get the connection, and do that instead of talking. Listen to that. Minx is actually saying don't communicate, or rather, communicate through sex. And the other podcast I wanted to recommend was, it's not up yet, but my dear old friend, 5x5 guy, also has a new podcast called Queer Sex Weekly. He's set up the website. The show blog will be at www.livejournal.com/users/QSW. That's standing for Queer Sex Weekly. And as soon as it comes out, I will review the actual episode. But again, he's one of my friends that I've converted to podcasting, and I'm feeling really guilty now because I know how much time and energy it takes. And I'm like, oh shit, I made everybody drink the podcasting Kool-Aid, and now they're not going to have a life. Anyway. All right, that almost wraps it up for the show. One more thing, an announcement I wanted to make that I saw for those living in California, especially in the Berkeley area. There is a jealousy conference that I so wish I could go to, but if you live in the Berkeley area, you can instead of me. There is a jealousy management conference, October 14th through the 16th in Berkeley, California. And as I understand it, it was originally planned as a simple one-day workshop, but now it's expanded to a full 3 days. There's a schedule of events available at www.geocities.com/Saturniaregna, SATURNIAREGNA / jealousy management confe.html, and that link will be on the show notes, of course. But if you're in the area, I would love to go to this, but can't be flying to California at the drop of a hat, much as I would like to. But it sounds great fun. If anybody goes to that conference, please write me, or hey, why not write me and attach an audio comment, or call the listener comment line at 206-600-5677 and give me a review of the conference, the workshops. Let me know how it went. All right. I think that about wraps it up for this week. As I said, we do have some interviews coming up over the next few weeks. I finally had time to deal with somebody else's polyamory instead of my own and set up some of the interviews that I'm very excited about. So thanks again for listening. Email me, cunningminx@gmail.com, with questions, comments, feedback. If you agree with what I say, stroke the minx. If you disagree, give me the feedback and we'll read it on the air. Thanks for listening, everyone, and remember, it's not all about the sex.